Well, hello, everybody. My name is Jeremy Grant. I'm part of the cybersecurity and privacy practice at Venable. We're a law firm based out of Washington, D.C. I also serve as an advisor to the FIDO Alliance on a variety of issues. I'm real excited for this panel to be joined by Rayissa Armata, who's the head of regulatory affairs at IDnow, as well as Santosh Rajvaidya, who is the director of product management at Jumio. The name of this session is called The State of Technology and Regulation for Remote Identity Verification in Europe. And I'll say it's one we scheduled in advance of the European Commission's new proposal on creating a new European digital identity wallet. We weren't planning it that way. We just happened to have some really excellent timing with the session. The new wallet proposal, I think, is one item we're going to want to talk about today. But I'll say that well before this proposal emerged, there was already quite a lot happening in remote ID verification in Europe, including regulatory initiatives in countries like Germany and France that were laying out specific technical approaches for remote ID proofing, as well as some work underway in places like Anisa and Etsy on new standards and guidelines. And of course, setting the stage for this discussion, the importance of remote identity verification has only become more important this last year amidst this terrible pandemic we've been in. Given the virtual elimination of most in-person services. On a global basis, we have seen fraud rates skyrocket as cyber criminals have been looking to take advantage of some of the weak identity verification tools that are, in many cases, legacy tools, but not necessarily performing quite the way we'd like them to be. But there's also been some really good stories as well, where remote identity verification tools have enabled people to continue to conduct business in a way that maybe they weren't able to before the pandemic. And I think we'll talk about that today as well. So as an opening question, either for Rayissa or Santosh, whoever wants to start off, how would you describe how remote identity verification tools are being used in Europe today?
Thank you, Jeremy. I'll start off. Santosh, hi, nice to be with all of you. Thank you for having us. I work with IDnow. We're an identity verification provider here in Europe and expanding globally. I head the regulatory affairs, so I get sort of a firsthand view of some of the topics that we're talking about today. And I think definitely, like you said, based on what has happened with the pandemic, we've seen a real upsurge on digital services, not just for identity proofing, but for all kinds of digital services. But before the pandemic, there were already movements to expand sort of on the innovation that exists out there in the IDV world. And we saw a clear movement from what's popular here in Europe, the video identification, which is sort of has the equivalency to being face-to-face. And especially for applications like in anti-money laundering, where the KYC has very strict regulations, all the member states have very strict and robust security requirements and technical standards that they follow. But there are some differences. For example, like you said, in France, this year we saw the PVID, or the remote identity verification standards, come out. And the process for the approval process that is underway with the French regulator, the cybersecurity agency in France, is one that's we've all been waiting for. It has robust security standards, and it also has what we call a hybrid solution. So while it does look at innovations and use an automated solution, there's still a human element to it. And I think that's an important trend that we see in Europe. When you look at Spain, or you look at, for example, Switzerland, they're using an NFC-based technology or capability. Germany still is looking at a video identification. Actually, yesterday they released some notice that their anti-money laundering regulations would also change and have an experimental clause that would also look at a type of self-sovereign identity with a digital wallet attached to it. So there's a lot of movement towards automated solutions and innovation, but I think it's not fully automated. It still has a human element in certain respects to this IDV. So it's going in stages.
Yeah, I think Rayissa summed it very well. What we see is there is no consistent approach when it comes to remote ID verification in Europe. There are countries like Switzerland, Germany, and others that are requiring video-based identity verification, that allows for a human agent to be on the other end and make sure that there is a genuine person who is present and who is sharing their ID on the other end, and that process becomes a bit cumbersome. Whereas there are other countries, including the UK and Eastern Europe, where they are allowing the use of remote identity verification, which is where you scan a document with your mobile app or with your web app, and submit that document for verification. And at the same time, you also provide a selfie for a photo match with the ID card, with the photo on the ID card. So there are these different approaches that are kind of quite prevalent. Uh, in general, what we see is that each state is coming up with their own requirements and their own regulations. For example, we just discussed the case of ENISA and ETSI, and they have come up with their new guidelines. So there certainly seems to be a lack of consistency, and the new digital identity wallet approach from European Commission seems to be that first step in the right direction.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Let me talk a little bit more about the standards picture, because I know, Rayissa, you've been one of the folks working on ETSI's specialist task force on identity proofing for trust service subjects, and love to hear a little bit more about what's happening there and how it might impact standards across the continent.
Yeah, sure. So this has been an ongoing working group project. We started last year. We were tasked with, like the ENISA report and project, looking at existing identity proofing methods, evaluating them, looking at innovative methods that are out on the market or that were about to come out onto the market, and to evaluate them for a new set of technical specifications and requirements. So our task was to find the best practices and security and policy requirements for these new identity proofing methods in trust services. Now, those identity proofing methods will also have impact on other types of identity proofing, like in anti-money laundering, or maybe even perhaps with the European Commission and the digital wallet. So these specifications, I think, have been long awaited. They're long overdue. We're excited to be putting that out, and we anticipate that to be in July.
In addition to the ETSI work, ENISA had put a report out on remote identity proofing this past March, and was wondering how the two might align.
We did collaborate with ENISA in discussing what both findings were for the identity proofing methods that exist, and both are interested in setting out sort of best practice approaches for risk assessment. The technical specifications will also allow trust services to be certified against these standards. So it's definitely a group effort. We share information and we consult each other, and we had a couple of meetings where we talked about our progress, the questions and issues that we were running into, and they did the same.
Thanks. And Santosh, any thoughts from your perspective in terms of these new efforts and how they might impact the standards landscape in Europe going forward?
Yeah, I could talk about the work that we are doing at the FIDO Alliance, more specifically within the FIDO Alliance ID verification and binding working group. Jeremy, as you know, we have not recently, it's been some time, we have formed this ID verification and binding working group, and we have created 3 subgroups within those: a document authentication subgroup, face verification, and an authenticator binding subgroup. What we are doing is we are working closely with the authorities in Europe, more specifically the UK Passport Office and ENISA. And thank you, Jeremy, for your efforts there in kind of working closely with some of these bodies. So the objective of the ID working group is to define the performance criteria for remote identity verification solutions, and then work closely with the third-party labs to create a certification program. And while we are working with these authorities in Europe, our goal is such that we are socializing our work with them, and our goal is such that going forward, these authorities can point in the direction of FIDO certification to fulfill the regulatory requirements that they are putting together for ID verification, for remote ID verification in their countries and in their regions. And FIDO ID verification certification can fulfill the needs of these regulations. It can align with those, and it can fulfill this, the need for those regulations in those geographies.
Thanks. And Rayissa, do you have any specific thoughts on the FIDO work underway? I'll say it's, setting the stage for folks who aren't familiar with it. It's focusing initially on document authentication. And then, beyond that, how can you actually take a selfie and match a face to, the face on a document? And, I think one of the things, we had certainly pointed out in conversations with ANISA and others was ANISA back in March had flagged one of their concerns with what they would call the remote automatic types of solutions, that there is not any way to test them right now in the marketplace, and the performance is all over the place. And this is the first serious effort, I think, any place across the globe to actually come up with some objective performance standards that, how would I say it, allows every company to innovate in terms of how they figure out if a document or a person is real or not, but still holds them to that same high standard in terms of saying you have to be able to sniff out this many fraudulent documents and pass this many legitimate applicants. So would welcome your take, Rayissa, on how that might fit within some of the broader identity ecosystem emerging in Europe right now with all of this.
Definitely. Yeah. So like Santosh, we're members and part of this working group with Santosh. And I think you're right. What I noticed that we're really hammering out are the security and risk analysis. And yes, we did that also in the Etsy working group, but I think the level that we're doing it with at the FIDO group is very extensive. And I think that will, both efforts will obviously carry over on how these innovations will take over in the marketplace. Ultimately, the user experience is one of the aspects, and making this something that's very convenient. Most users aren't concerned with their identity or the data privacy. They'll tick the boxes and move on. They just want to get their service. But for providers like Santosh at Jumio and us at IDnow, security is very important. And that's why we work so hard in these groups to make sure that we can share our experience with these regulators and policymakers, standard setters, in exactly applying the secure, robust requirements into these products to make sure that these fraudsters don't attack these systems. And I think we all worked on contributing to the threat analysis and the risks that go with it. So we had some extensive talks about that, and that will definitely carry over. And that's what the regulators consider when they're making these new requirements.
Thanks. And I'll flag, one of the things that has stood out to me about this new effort within FIDO Alliance has been that it is bringing companies together who are traditionally competitors like IDnow and Jumio to collaborate along with many others, and that there's a recognition that people need to come together to try and come up with a standard here and a way to test. And we're also, of course, getting input from a lot of the big service providers who want to evaluate these solutions. How is it? I mentioned before, there's a lot of products that look to do remote document authentication and selfie match, and the performance really is all over the place. Could each of you give a little bit of perspective in terms of why some companies manage to do this well, whereas others seem to be advertising one capability but delivering another?
Well, Jeremy, maybe I can share my perspective. There is this problem of ID verification is quite diverse, and it depends on which region, which geography that you are talking about. We cannot compare apples with oranges. If you look at the more developed markets, such as the United States or certain markets in Europe, there are very sophisticated standard-based and sophisticated documents with built-in security features available. Whereas if you look at certain developing countries, they are still issuing paper-based IDs. And the
Yes.
performance of solution or ID proofing solutions just vary from these one geography to another. If you're talking about the US market, where there are kind of NFC enabled passports, or other geographies in the in Europe, you can almost verify those documents with 99.9% accuracy rates. Whereas when you are looking at those paper based, in certain cases handwritten IDs, that is where the real issues stem from. And that is why when you talk about these performance number, you may find them all over the place. And that is exactly what we are trying as to standardize as part of the ID working group effort within the FIDO Alliance, is to bring these IDs into different tiers of sophistication, wherein we could say that, hey, for the top tier, we are going to need 99% accuracy rates in order for a vendor solution to be certified, and so on. And that is an ongoing attempt.
Thanks. And Rayissa, do you have anything to add on top of that?
I would agree with Santosh. It's really important work, and it depends what geography we're talking about. Obviously, the United States or North America and Europe and parts of Asia also have different standards than in other countries. So for us, what we're doing is helping make sure that those standards can be universal, those security standards, and that's I think one of the most important aspects of what we're doing with this FIDO working group.
Thanks. Well, I wanted to shift now to the recent proposal from the European Commission. For years, we've had a really, from my perspective, impressive effort within the Commission around the eIDAS program, which looked to ensure interoperability of different digital identity solutions issued by member states, but largely interoperability for public facing, or I should say government apps in different countries. So, just a few days ago, we saw a proposal that's really a massive expansion of that looks much more at a European digital identity strategy centered around the idea of digital identity wallets that would be issued by each member state. I'd love each of you to talk a little bit more about this proposal and how you expect it to maybe impact the market in different ways.
Sure. I'm happy to start on that. So when you look at the digital identity wallet offering, Jeremy, basically, what is happening today in the market is when a user needs to onboard to the application, or a user needs to be onboarded onto an application, they will need to verify their identity, whether it is offline world or in online world, either by presenting their ID or scanning ID every time they are applying for a new account, which is quite a cumbersome method, especially when it involves verification like videos or offline presentation of IDs. What is happening with digital identity wallet is you do a one-time verification of your ID, and the identity is created in the digital identity wallet, and from there on the user can reuse it multiple times across different applications. And there are multiple advantages of that approach. The first is, in the most cases, the PII information, the user information, is stored on the user's mobile wallet. It does not leave user's mobile wallet. That is first. The second is that the user has full control over what information they are going to share, as in the pieces of information. If the use case only requires my first name and last name, I can just share that information, as opposed to presenting my entire ID, which has my date of birth and address on it as well, and my passport number or driver's license number. So I can share what is required. And the third advantage is the verification is almost instantaneous, which does not require scanning of IDs or presenting yourself in front of a video agent. So with all of that, there is a lot of user convenience and flexibility that is offered as part of these digital identities. And hence, going forward, what we imagine is more and more users are going to gravitate towards the digital identity offering. And in terms of the market impact, we see that both service providers as well as verification providers are going to accept this as a form of ID that users can bring, rather than bringing their physical cards or otherwise.
Yeah, Rayissa, perspectives from your side on the new proposal.
Well, thank you. Yes, I agree with Santosh completely. I think what I would add to that conversation is, in the spirit of EIDAS, this whole cross-border services was the goal, and I think with these amendments, we will definitely see more of that spirit of hopefully some interoperability happening here. I think what's going to be really important is the trust of the issuer of these digital wallets. That's going to be a theme that will be discussed and covered over the next coming months. We'll see how long this process takes. I anticipate a few years. And will it be, each member state's governments? How will the private industry take part in this, and what will they contribute? And then also maybe the second aspect that's going to be really discussed a lot, and I think Santosh will agree with me, are is that toolbox, the technical standards and specifications that have yet to come out, and how will private industry or standard setting organizations like FIDO, like ETSI, other European standards organizations, what kind of role will they play? So I think we have a lot to see yet. It's exciting news. It will have a big impact on Europe. I think it will also have definitely play a role in how other geographies approach the digital wallet as well.
So, one of my questions as I read it was it envisions that, every member state, every government will come up with a digital wallet that their citizens will be able to use. And it raised the question to me of, what if I want to leverage a government-backed digital identity, but I don't want to download a government app onto my phone? Are there other alternatives that are going to be out there, or is it just going to lock people into something that's a government-provided solution?
That's a great question. Maybe there will be a hybrid solution. I think the framework, sort of the architecture, we'll learn more about it soon, I hope, and see how that works out. But I think, yes, definitely the member state governments will have a big say in how that framework, what that framework will look like, definitely.
Santosh, any perspectives from your side on that question?
Yeah, I wanted to add some thoughts there that absolutely it is going to be challenging that, hey, do I really want to download an application from my government? Is it going to do anything else? And Jeremy, as we discussed that there are existing ways of verifying your identity online or offline. And what I anticipate is that those will still be in existence. That is one. The second is, in addition to these governments, we see that there are private companies building digital identity ecosystem or worldwide digital identity ecosystems. And what we believe is there will be choice to the end user whether they want to provide a government-based digital identity wallet, a private digital identity wallet, or just kind of provide their IDs for scan or in physical presence. So those are all the options that are available to users, and yeah, these will be certainly different choices available, and they will be able to decide which one they want to use going forward.
I think that's a really good perspective. I think we're just at about time. I'd say in closing, in addition to saying thanks to Rayissa and Santosh, if you've been watching this and are more interested in getting involved in FIDO's work on identity verification, we have a very active work group with some great progress underway. So please reach out and jump into the process. But with that, I think we'll wrap things up and perhaps even have time for a bit of questions. Thank you.